decades of serving Guyana as a member of parliament and a minister of government. I am confident that you will serve with distinction as Speaker of our National Assembly. I'd also like to congratulate Mr. Leonard Schumann on being the Deputy Speaker. As far as I know, it is the first time that someone from the indigenous people from the Amerindian community is serving as a Deputy Speaker in Guyana and maybe elsewhere. Let me also welcome all the new members on both sides of the House, wish them all the best, and tell them that their time in this National Assembly will be memorable. They could make it worthwhile. They could make it they could make it memorable by making contributions that are positive and by making constructive criticism. Mr. Speaker, I'd also like to congratulate our ministers. They have come in to lead at a time when Guyana is on a threshold. There has been a pause between 2015 to now. We have got to pick up the pieces and move forward. Mr. Speaker, this budget was supposed to have been presented shortly after March 2000. But it is now here at last. I cannot proceed without congratulating the hardworking and dedicated staff at the Ministry of Finance and the ministers who have contributed to compiling this budget in record time. Mr. Speaker, also please permit me to pay homage to the First Peoples of Guyana, our Amerindian brothers and sisters. As the Honorable Member Alice Charlie said, it was in 1992 that President Chedi Jagan, recognizing the contributions of our Amerindian brothers and sisters, designated September as Amerindian Heritage Month. Mr. Speaker, the members on the opposing side of the House presented during their term in office what they termed the Good Life budget. These Good Life budgets, however, introduced and or increased over 200 new taxes. These Good Life budgets took away the $10,000 annual grant from our school children. These good Life budgets took away the subsidy on electricity and water for pensioners. Mr. Speaker, the same Good Life budget closed the sugar estates and introduced VAT on electricity, water, medical supplies, among other items. Mr. Speaker, the same Good Life budgets increased fees for drainage and irrigation and VAT on agricultural and mining equipment, among others. Mr. Speaker, this begs the question, who was really enjoying the good life? Because it most certainly was not the ordinary people of Guyana, which makes up the majority of Guyana. I can't help but say this, Mr. Speaker. The mere fact that the APNU-AFC coalition is sitting over there is testimony that those budgets were not really good life budgets. Mr. Speaker, internationally, it is known that mathematics is a challenge for the APNU-AFC, my colleagues across the floor. Remember the 33-65 fiasco. Now I am also convinced that English language seems to also be a challenge. Mr. Speaker, it seems that it is difficult to understand that this 2020 budget presented by my government has not only restored the school grant, but increased it. It has restored subsidy on water for pensioners. It has removed taxes that were introduced by the previous administration. And it caters to the reopening of sugar estates closed by the AFC. It removes the fees for D&I, removes the VAT from agri-equipment and the VAT from mining equipment. This, Mr. Speaker, is a budget that will benefit each and every Guyanese, including the members on the outside. Mr. Speaker, begs the question, which of the two, the APNU AFC budgets or this budget, actually looks like it's leading to the good life for Guyanese generally? The answer is obviously a no-brainer. Mr. Speaker, the promises made in our manifesto will be kept, starting with this budget. We would have heard some of my colleague members already explaining how our manifesto promises will be kept. Mr. Speaker, the last time I made my presentation in this honorable house, I was labeled, along with my colleague, Dr. Frank Anthony, as spreading untruths by the then Minister of Health, when I informed this honorable house about her incompetence and that of her politically appointed heads in the various regions. Mr. Speaker, under the stewardship of the APNU AFC government, the public health sector in Guyana was devastated. Let us talk about health service delivery. Using Region 6, the region where I come from and where my colleague speaking after me comes from, as an example. Mr. Speaker, I heard a member on the opposite side, Honorable Member Holder, talking about square pegs. Tell me, Mr. Speaker, an ex-bank clerk managing the second largest region's healthcare services, what do we call that? Obviously a square peg. A minister of so-called public health, having no clue of healthcare delivery, that's a square peg. Mr. Speaker, I asked doctors managing hospitals in all 10 administrative regions of Guyana about their issues. Among the issues raised were shortages of drugs and medical supplies, equipment not working, REOs not cooperating, especially in the hinterland, not releasing fuel for people to make, for health staff to make their visits. Mr. Speaker, when we took over in Region 6, there were 5 anesthetic machines. 4 of them not working. This is in the month of August. A biomedical engineer was asked to check and see what can be fixed. He fixed one immediately. 2 others that were not working for over 3 years will be fixed within the week. But Mr. Speaker, here's a shocker. And an example of how APNU AFC government functions. There was a new anesthetic machine that was bought for millions of dollars, sole source. By the way, I pause here. There's an honorable member in this house when making a speech in 2015 said sole sourcing for the APNU AFC will be in the past. But Mr. Speaker, that's definitely not so. This one was sole source. Mr. Speaker, this new anesthetic machine has never been used and cannot be used in the New Amsterdam Public Hospital. So it is parked there. But do you know, Mr. Speaker, why it cannot be used? It cannot be used because it is an anesthetic machine that is to be used for veterinary services. To put animals to sleep for surgical interventions. I need the advice here of the Honorable Attorney General. Sir, who's liable? The supplier, the receiver, or somebody else? How do the taxpayers get their money's worth? And on the other hand, Mr. Speaker, as an animal activist, I say we should treat animals badly. At the same time, Mr. Speaker, we should not treat human beings as animals. So, Mr. Speaker, imagine my surprise when the honorable member, in his opening remarks, said the DP government employs square pegs in round holes. Mr. Speaker, the honorable member is now in opposition. Bragged and boasted about a CT machine, a CT scan machine that they received in 2015. By the way, that machine was negotiated for under the previous PVPC government. Mr. Speaker, during our last budget debate in 2018, pictures were displayed showing supposedly a CT scanner being installed in the New Amsterdam hospital. Mr. Speaker, once again, I get the opportunity to refute that untruth. The CT scanner is still not operational up to today. It is my government that is putting systems in place to ensure that this machine is up and running by the end of the week. Mr. Speaker, I have to mention that for 5 years, when that machine was lying idle, could have saved the ordinary man millions of dollars, but was stored in a room. Mr. Speaker, storage was not free. It was at a cost of $14.5 million per month, $174 million per year. Can you remember the famous, or let us say infamous, Sausage Street bond? I remember the same minister saying that she was storing the CT scan and $90 million piece of equipment in the so-called bond as a justification. Mr. Speaker, in 1 year, we could have bought 2 machines. It boggled the mind then, and it continues to do so today. Mr. Speaker, the story in Region 6 gets even worse. In the Auditor General's report for 2018, quote, comparison of the prices paid for drugs and medical supplies procured by the regional administration from local suppliers with that of the prices paid by MMU, as indicated on the price list being submitted, revealed that items bought by the regional administration had significantly higher prices when compared to the MMU prices. Mr. Speaker, in some cases, the region paid 300% more. In 2 instances, Mr. Speaker, and it is quoted in the Auditor General's report, the region paid as much as 1,669% more. A tablet Risperidone, $13 per tablet in Georgetown. The region paid $230 for one. And Mr. Speaker, they didn't buy one, they didn't buy 100, they didn't even buy 1,000, they bought 8,400 of these tablets. Calculate the monies that were lost, the taxpayers' money. Surgical gloves that could have been bought for $929 per box. The region paid $5,200 per box. I wonder, Mr. Speaker, if this was the reason, we have no record of central purchasing of drugs and medical supplies. Was it to facilitate this kind of spending that the Auditor General reported? One could ask, Mr. Speaker, what happened with the Regional Tender Board in Region 6? Why they didn't oversee such spending? The answer is, Mr. Speaker, that the Region 6 Tender Board, that is supposed to have members from both sides, the government side and the opposition side, had no opposition members sitting on that tender board. None. Bear in mind, Mr. Speaker, in Region 6, we had 20 out of the 30 regional seats and had no representation in the tender board. Mr. Speaker, someone on the other side, some honorable member, spoke about corruption. Well, Mr. Speaker, that is corruption. The same team, RE1 team, that was appointed by the AP and UAFC, Mr. Speaker, spent over $76 million. Over $76 million to supposedly purchase COVID relief items. Among these items, Mr. Speaker, there is rental for 2 buses. The only thing they did was to rent these 2 buses. Government had to provide drivers. Government had to provide fuel for $480,000 per month. Mr. Speaker, whilst they were renting buses under the shed of the Regional Health Services building, there were 3 buses in working order, parked there. Mr. Speaker, what do you call that? Somebody, okay, I'm not going to say more. Mr. Speaker, even with the supposed emergency purchase of drugs and medical supplies for the institution I spoke about that the general referred to, Region 6 was permanently out of drugs, and they are still out of drugs and medical supplies. Mr. Speaker, there were no IV antibiotics, no flagyl, no dopamine, no adrenaline, no IV GTN, no heparin, no proton pump inhibitors, no H2 blockers, no sutures, and the list is long, Mr. Speaker. I'm just mentioning those. Because as a surgeon, Mr. Speaker, I can tell you that these items are critical and crucial to ensure a successful outcome for patients. So not only was the operating theaters non-functional, but even emergency surgeries could not have been done effectively. Mr. Speaker, in addition to the severe shortages of drugs, let me tell you something else. A new digital X-ray was purchased, again, sole source, to set up in the Amsterdam hospital. Any medical person is going to tell you a digital X-ray is excellent. But Mr. Speaker, you know what? The digital X-ray was bought, the old X-ray was removed, but the digital X-ray cannot work because a very important component is missing. How can this be possible, Mr. Speaker? How are we buying equipment to serve the people of Region 6? The laboratory in Region 6 cannot function to its capacity because the equipment, most of the equipment are non-functional. Not because they're broken, Mr. Speaker, but because there is no servicing. We all know laboratory equipment needs to be serviced regularly. They need to be calibrated so that patients could get correct results. Because based on
Honorable
those
member,
results,
you will need an extension to conclude.
wow.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to ask that the honourable member be given additional 5 members to conclude.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. Honorable member, you can continue.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, all the positive programs that we had in Region 6 were killed immediately as soon as APNU AFC got in power. The geriatric care program was killed. The extended home-based care program was killed. The health center management committees that we had were killed. The health facilities days were killed. Mr. Speaker, the previous public health minister recommissioned the National Ophthalmology Hospital in 2019. Recommissioned. Guess what, Mr. Speaker? For 2019, they did a grand total of 2 cataract surgeries after the recommissioning. But by the way, Honorable Member, 2 cataract surgeries in 2019 was better than 0 in 18 and 17 and 16. Mr. Speaker, the then minister also commissioned an X-ray machine that a few months after is not working, no servicing. Mr. Speaker, HIV management, you want to cry. Guyana was on the cusp of becoming a nation that was certified as having no transmission of HIV from mother to child. No longer, Mr. Speaker, because there are no HIV kits to test sometimes. There is no HIV medication. It is criminal that we are now having babies again that are born with HIV. No fault of theirs. Mr. Speaker, Lethem and Mabaruma are not spared. They got digital X-rays too. But the problem is that they have the X-ray needs 3-phase voltage. Cannot be provided in Lethem and Mabaruma. Mr. Speaker, let me quickly go to some of the things that will be done in Region 6. We'll have the completion of the maternity ward, construction of tuberculosis care and treatment center in Port Morant, rehab of my Curie Hospital, rehab of the Winifred Gaskin School in Manchester. Mr. Speaker, before I close, I need to reply to some some statements that were made. Mr. Speaker, the geographic MP for Region 2 made some claims of achievement of the last government. On speaking with the RHO, the following came out. And if I were that honorable member, I would not have made any of these claims. Mr. Speaker, the rehab works at OJDH, Oscar Joseph District Hospital, at a cost of $9 million, included setting up a centralized oxygen. To date, it's now working. Maternity home that was constructed 2.5 years was not complete. No furnishing. It is now being used as the COVID center after it was completed and furnished. $28 million. Construction of a theater, a new theater at PHS, the member said, $40.9 million. Never used, cannot be used because it doesn't meet the specifications. Roof is leaking. Extension of drug ban in Saudi, the man got drugs to store. Why extend the ban? Mr. Speaker, 2 incinerators, $10 million were built, cannot be used because they do not meet specifications. Oh, and rice? I want to remind the honorable member that Mr. Granger, then president, when the farmers met difficulties and asked for help, as they used to be given under the PUP, said rice was not government business. Honorable member, the success of rice in Guyana was not because of the AP and UAFC, it was in spite of the AP and UAFC. It was due to the farmers' hard work, the new varieties of rice that were developed by NARI under the PEP, and the support of farmers' organizations like the RPA. Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Member for Finance said, just want to tell her that this budget is in 2 parts. The first one, we got to cover the monies that were spent illegally already. The second part is what we are trying to do up to year end. The Bartica Regional Hospital was a regional hospital, unless if you declassified it and then reclassified it. Doctors there and in other parts of Guyana, they were trained in Cuba under the scholarship program that was implemented by the PEP. And the focus of this budget is on COVID and stimulating the economy. Next year, you will see transformative programs. Mr.
Focus
Speaker,
on winding down now. Focus on winding down.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, there is a saying when I was very young. El pueblo unido jamás será vencido. A people united cannot be defeated. And Mr. Speaker, I want to close by saying, reading this poem based on which our prayer is built on, by Rabindranath Tagore. Where the mind is without fear and the head is held high, where knowledge is free, where the world has not been broken up into fragments by narrow domestic walls, where words come out from the depth of truth, where tireless striving stretches its arms to perfection, where the clear stream of reason has not lost its way to the dreary desert sands of dead habits, where the mind is led forward by thee into ever-widening thoughts and action, into that heaven of freedom, my Father, let my country awake. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.